Hello, I am Phantom X, and this is the Ashen Forge, and I'm joined by Diggs and Legendary Neurotoxin. We are not joined by Sog, which is why you just had that mess up at the beginning there, so you get two intros. Oh, yeah, we got to also unmute everyone else. OBS and Stream Deck is not playing very well right now, so I could go into what just happened. I will not. Yeah, how's everybody doing?
Doing good.
Great.
Yeah, so it's actually, we went out of order last week, so this time we have actually quite a bit of stuff, I guess, to go over. There was a live stream. We had the APOC testing on the 20th, kind of their Steam announcement. What else? The dev discussion in the forums, and then the new packs to buy stuff. So quite a bit of things, actually, to kind of go over. And then anything, I'm sure, Diggs, you're our resident forum person, assuming you haven't been kicked out yet. And so if there's anything there, we can talk about it.
I have not quite been kicked out yet. I play nice. We are still running, we probably have 20 pages or so going on DPS meters. But it's the same old conversation. Wow, there's like 14 responses since I last looked at it earlier this week.
And the general impression is what?
Oh, the general impression is just me and one other person constantly talking about.
So it's.
I'm happy that there are no DPS meters. It's actually three of us.
Okay.
So two of us are happy that there's no DPS meters or combat trackers because we feel like they add to toxicity, as does Steven, which is why they aren't planning to support them. And then one other person is
support Steven?
They aren't
I'm kidding.
Yeah. And so the other person is saying they're a top-end raider, so they want to depend on combat tractors, and they're hoping that the devs will use that to make raids even more difficult, so difficult that you'll have to rely on combat trackers in order to defeat them.
But isn't another way to determine if you have a high enough DPS is whether or not you succeed?
Wow. But how did you succeed? That's
I
why
would
you need the combat.
rather there being more to the game than just DPS. WoW had mostly DPS, but then a little bit of like doing a song and dance and stuff while the battle goes on to make sure you're in the right place. So you jump over the ground wave attack or whatever it is, all of that silly stuff. Boss goes into freeze mode and you have to fight the little spawn lane, so you split into groups. That's fine and dandy, but it's boring. The idea that somebody's value in a battle is just as much their ability to do damage as it is their ability to get the hell out of the way of boss attacks so they don't need to be healed constantly might be the thing that's most important in this game. And if that ends up being the case, a DPS meter doesn't matter. It would have to be DPS versus, estimated risk of being close to the boss. And now we're starting to get into a bunch of poker math that we're going to need jQuery to process in the background, and nobody's going to do that because that's stupid. We don't need that.
Well, it's interesting because part of the live stream discussion, there was a question about this idea of should there be content that really only maybe like the top 0.1% of players can actually complete. And the question was sort of in favor of that. And essentially, it's hard with the transcripts because I didn't get to watch the video, so I don't know who actually answered it. I just know what the answer was. I assume it was Steven. I don't know. But the answer was sort of essentially said, well, we're going to do everything for everyone, which so often happens to be the case.
Well, it makes sense if you make it that all the content is exclusive to the top people. Of course, only the top people will get it. That means people only join the top groups, and you start to have these real problems. If instead it's, approximately a big enough group that's, got some tough people that have maybe seen some raids before, win or lose, they kind of understand, what they're getting into here. And they're just the first group that's organized and ready that happens to be there. then, you know, whether they win or lose should just come down to their ability. And maybe if they are actually, you know, to some degree properly armed, like, does everybody have a piece of armor in every slot and, you know, a reliable weapon that they're using, that sort of stuff. So if, you know, if that's more of the modality, that it's more important to have maybe the grouping of all the different classes available to address the different elements of the battle, and it's less important to have, you know, the toughest 20, 40, 60, whatever, you know, people on the server there just to have a chance at completing it, then it definitely makes it a lot less exclusive and a lot more approachable as well. It makes it a lot more approachable as something that, you know, I kind of compare it to like a moving carnival or something where, you know, the boss battle and, you know, the fights leading up to it are here over in this part of the world, and once you defeat it, well, it basically goes on tour and now it's over here in this part of the world. The bosses maybe changed a bit, or, you know, completely different encounters are different, but more or less this, like, you know, roving raid sort of system is constantly going, so that everybody essentially gets a chance to have a crack at it, and that it isn't something, again, that you go to one fixed place at one, you know, one time when everybody's armed exactly a certain way, or otherwise you're just wasting your time, because that's counterintuitive to having, you know, fun and immersive gameplay and cool battle stories about cool stuff going on.
Yeah, what I've been arguing for, which I hope we will see in this game, is that, and especially since Steven talks about trying to get the game closer, more of the RPG back in the MMORPG, is that we're able to synergize our abilities. So if someone's using Ice Prison, you know, that's a good time to use, you know, if the mage is using Ice Prison and trapping somebody with ice, it procs, or it stays there long enough that other people know, okay, while they're in that Ice Prison, I should be doing this, so that you're supporting what each other class is doing, so that you're tracking it in real time versus through a combat tracker, and so it feels more like when we're playing D&D. I know you're likely to use this ability. So and I know how I want to synergize with that ability. We do that all the time when we play.
Yeah. Yes.
And you know, if you, so then you enjoy playing with your group because you know how they're likely to play, and it's not so much of somebody else telling you, okay, you have to have this build, but you yourself thinking, okay, I know they're going to play this. So therefore, next time I get an ability, I'm going to get this ability because I know that's going to help me support them in this. I'm hoping that that's more of what we're seeing. And then we make those adjustments as we're going through the encounters, again, just like we do in D&D.
I should read his...
Rather than looking at the raw data.
I guess I should read his response in full. It said, yes, we like it and we want to see it in game. When that content comes in, when it's incredibly hard to do, eventually new chapters take place and levels get higher, and what was once the hardest content gets trickled down and becomes more accessible. There's actually a lot of little things in that. So one, you already know my stance on levels and that sort of thing with new expansion. He calls them chapters, I assume, expansions.
I think the chapters are not as robust as expansions, but closer to DLCs than expansions, but still levels. Yeah, still levels. Still levels.
So that's one thing with that power game. But what I was getting at is to, I guess he's kind of saying, well, eventually, you know, as you get a higher level, it's easier, so you'll do it. So what was once the top 1% of people will eventually, and I guess my thought is immediately, okay, well, how many people actually go back? Like, how many of your average players actually went back and played Molten Core, right? Or went through Onyxia after, like, it was no longer challenging, essentially.
Well, but that's the difference with Ashes of Creation, is that regions change. They change level as well, so there is reason for to go back.
You mean as far as going up, like, what do you mean? As far as the...
Well, areas don't just go up and only go up. They go up and down. They rise and fall as nodes level and fall. So.
Yeah, but that content would change, right? So what isn't that what they've kind of said? So if you have a dragon that sort of all of a sudden comes about to destroy your town, you kill that dragon, you continue on, become Metropolis, that encounter may not exist anymore, correct? As everything changes.
Well, it might not exist there. It might be in a different place, right? Or something similar in a different place. It might appear later at a different place.
Oh.
Won't be exactly the same.
I don't know. So, that kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent.
Mm-hmm. But what was the new one? So you saw a new dev question, which is about making friends, right?
Making friends. How, it's a simple question. What's your favorite way to make new friends in an MMO?
Why are you going into an MMO without having friends? What's wrong with you? Haven't you played an MMO before? But that's generally, I come in with people that I know and then go from there. Meows are different, because my intent in pretty much all meows in perpetuity, unless something considerably changes or is offered or something that's of more interest to me, is to be a traveler. And that's when I do that, whatever.
This is a Pantheon Twitter question to me.
Yeah, I mean I'm my goal is I'll make friends along the way, but I don't expect there's going to be this Forrest Gump style band of people following in my footsteps as I run along from town to town or whatever. I expect that I'll meet somebody, maybe I'll come across them again if I come through that town again. But otherwise, for the context of a meow, I don't expect that I'm going to be like sitting down and having a whole lot of long-term buddy interactions with people, except for probably like people of higher rank and stature that want to have access to my maps and information.
I think that's not true. I think you will be sitting down and having those types of conversations, because that's the nature of where the games that we're following, the MMORPG, which is Ashes of Creation, and Meow, which is Chronicles of Valyria. I think both of those, because they're so dynamic, you're naturally going to have conversations about what's going on in the region, what changed, what cities have advanced, what are it's a multiplayer evolving online world. What has evolved since the last time you were in that region or the last time that you were online?
Right.
It's not going to be the same.
I go back there.
Well, I'm just saying wherever you are, right? It's going to be like, what's been going on? Because I don't know. It's different from the static games that we were playing where everything was the same. You didn't have to have conversations because you already knew the storyline. But here the storylines will be changing and, really on a daily basis could be changing considerably. But the other thing that will be, so the way I made friends in EverQuest and World of Warcraft is I'd be off soloing, but if I'm running past people who are having trouble, one of the things that I love to be social, one of the ways I love to be social is by giving people Spirit of the Wind or healing people as I'm running by or giving people whatever buffs just as I run by and say hello. But often I would be making friends because I'd be adventuring in the same spot as other people who are also adventuring at the same time that I am. So we see each other for a few hours and you just are social. But I think what happens here, even if you haven't made friends beforehand, you're going to be building community. So you're going to be building a city, you're going to be building a village. And again, as you're doing that, you're going to see the same people who are online with you. Well, you might not be if you're just exploring. But
most people
in general, people, that's an easy way to start building a community because you actually are creating a village and defending a village and getting to know the people who are working beside you to help you with that.
So some of the responses, forum responses are always interesting to read. One of them, this one I actually think makes most sense. It's just simple. Through random occurrences in open world. That's sort of how you meet new people. But one, forcing... it essentially says forcing players to interact organically. I don't know that organically and forcing sort of go together very well. I think I know what they mean, but just basically don't make group finders available.
Right.
What else? There was someone who another person said, I don't
think of the like Landmark or Trove or those sorts of games where when you're in proximity of somebody, so long as you're not hostile with them, you're like automatically grouped with them, sort of stuff. Someone like just doing that.
So sort of Warhammer Online, they were really the first to start, sort of world quests thing. Where you get within an area and you'd automatically join to. I think they were the first to really do that. I could be remembering that wrong. Here's someone that said, on the PvE end of things, I almost never make friends with somebody I've only grouped with.
Just one time.
Still, it's on the PvP side of things, I become friends with people I'm fighting with and against. So it's just a lot of interesting. I guess when I think of like,
and that was Alpha Soul, by the way, who is on the Dungeon Crawler Network.
To me, that sort of is an interesting take on PvP versus the PvE. Which again, I feel like there's going to definitely be two very different mindsets of player groups in this game. The thing about group finders actually kind of made sense to me. So when I think back to World of Warcraft, EverQuest, EverQuest I got in through my uncle, but it was sort of meeting people through someone I knew. World of Warcraft, like the two guilds that I was with the longest, it was basically, a shout or an open world chat of, hey, we're looking for somebody to come try to help us with a raid. I think like one of them was ZG or something. And it's like, so I responded. And then, the next thing you know, I have a group that I'm with for a year or whatever. So I think there is some truth to the idea of, group finders just kind of take out the need to meet people. You just queue up, and as long as you know what you're doing, you don't have to talk to anybody.
Well, but again, you don't talk to anybody because you kind of know what you're doing, and you've all done the same stuff. What are you going to talk about?
I'm not convinced this idea of an evolving. I'm not convinced. I don't know how they're going to be able to. I feel like, yes, it's going to be different from what we're used to because they're going to force you to have 8 people. So obviously that means you're going to be using skills that are only reason you really would need 8 is so that you could have use for everyone, right? And all of their special individualized things. So at first that's going to be kind of cool, but how many times can they actually make that seem new and fresh, right? Like the first maybe 6 times you do it, we need the rogue to go unlock this, and we need the hunter to go track something.
I don't think that's where you're going to be.
But when you get to my point.
I think you're going to be making your friends when you're in town.
My point is more to your thing of, that's group finder thing is because you just know what you're supposed to do, so there's no need to talk. My thing with this is eventually, maybe the 50th time that you're going on a raid with 7 other people, I'm not convinced they're going to be able to continuously make it that different. I feel like eventually it's going to be World of Warcraft caught all up, but it's just going to be more scope to it. So eventually, I just don't know how they'll do that. How many different ways can they make the need for a lockpick exist? How many different ways can they make the need for a tracker exist to make it interesting and not just something that, this is new, but we've seen it before?
Well, one, I don't think you have to, but that's a tangent, right? Because that's not really about making. It's probably already made your friends at that point.
But that's getting back to the argument with the group finders that people just know what you don't have to talk because you know the raid, the group, the dungeon.
But one, you don't need a group finder because you know where to find everybody in game. You live with them, or you've already made
in World of Warcraft. Yet most people primarily.
Do you live with them? You know where their house is.
You're on the same server as them.
No, I mean you know where they live, not what server they're on. You know where their house is in your town.
Live? I thought WoW was just a bunch of murder hobos.
Right. It's going to be different because you're going to have your freeholds. You're going to have I'm going to know where your freehold is. I'm going to know when you're going to be online. That's even just by playing at the same time you're playing. But we've also got Twitch. We've also got Discord. There's all kinds of ways to have made friends.
EverQuest 2 had housing. I never once met somebody at their house.
It didn't have. It
was instant, but it's still areas.
It's not the same thing because I can go to your place and it's not like I have to wait to get in or knock or something. I literally can just go to your place. It's going to be more like Landmark.
Too, if I gave you permission.
It's going to be closer to Landmark than EverQuest.
Just saying.
And come to mention, we had in Landmark we had tutorials, outside tutorials. We had the what do we call them? The meets, the swap meets. We had swap meets. We had.
That's just because it was such a damn kind of difficult game to learn the subtleties. You had to have sharing. It's a whole different experience, right? Landmark, you're building. We all say
I'm saying, but it's going to be.
It was really more about
closer.
building, which is to me very different from fighting. So.
But it's going to be closer to that because we're building the buildings. We want to see what the buildings look like. They're all different. It's changing. And once the building is established, we know where to find them. But there's all kinds of ways. It's all so different from what it was 20 years ago and even 10 years ago, now that we have Twitch and Discord and all kinds of stuff. And everybody's bringing their friends from one game to another.
Sorry, I'm answering a question.
Mm-hmm. So we can just address that. I mean, the question from Woodchip is, you guys seem to be more like my playstyle, more PvE than PvP. Which do you think is better for area? See, I've honestly, my thought, which is what I put in chat there, is that PvE is if you're trying to make productive progress, and PvP is if you're trying to make destructive progress. And that's, basically what it comes down to. If you're out there going to, PvP, you're not just going to kick someone over and that's it. You're going to try to take what you can. You're going to try to take whatever stuff they're escorting or whatever. If it's a town, you're taking it over. You don't just go attack a town all willy-nilly for fun of it. You attack a town to take it over. So, or at least, I guess to take it over long enough to loot it in full and then just abandon it. But that's more of the progress that I think of with PvP. Or at the same time, merchants need some reason why stuff breaks down and why they can make more sales. So ships get destroyed, wagons get destroyed, whatever sorts of things get destroyed in battle, things get ruined in battle. That creates a new opportunity for people to replace them. So that's going to be kind of the part where PvP kind of, moves progress along, but at the same time, PvE is where you can actually do the productive stuff, where you can do the generating of things, where you're going to build things up, where you're going to increase the tier of things, or, whatever it is that you're trying to do. The thing that's going to give you, advancement, like level ups, or give you your chance to research things and make better things and do stuff better, that's coming out of the PvE side of things. So in terms of that, which one is more appealing to you? Which facet of the game is the thing that gets you excited about the game?
I think both games are PvX, so I can't tell you which is going to feel more PvP than the other. I think there's more to lose in Chronicles of Illyria if you're purchasing land or titles. Also, I think with Chronicles of Illyria, I guess you have to think about whether or not you're into constantly turning over, like there's going to be character turnover. You're going to be sparking into different characters rather than playing one character for 5 or 10 years.
I love it. I get kind of bored seeing the same character. Give me variation.
Yeah, I mean,
I prefer having the same character, but I have alts, but
either one. Yeah, well, definitely. So the question of PvE versus PvP, I mean, both are going to be driven, or supposedly going to be driven by PvP. So they're both going to have equally strong components of both. So if you're completely PvP averse, like want no part of it, honestly, neither of these games are probably going to be exactly what you want, because you're going to have some sort of interaction and probably a negative way at some point through your gameplay with other characters. Not all the time. I mean, Steven's definitely trying to make sure that you can exist as a PvE player. We've already talked and discussed why that's important, because you're going to want those folks to be in your game. Equally, the other game we talk about, both worlds, I mean, they're all going to, the change is all driven through PvP, like Nura was saying. So the destructive force in order to build up. So you're going to have to interact to some degree. If I guess I'd almost say if someone is really against any form of PvP interaction, you should probably go like to Pantheon. I mean, if you're looking for something new that's just not, out yet, I mean, you start looking more down the lines of like Pantheon or something like that. Because both of these, and I think we can agree that PvP part is needed, right? The things that we want, a dynamic world that changes, really the only way, unless you have like 1,000 creators at your studio who are constantly churning out new stuff themselves every week so that players don't just burn through it. That would be another alternative, right? If you want a constant world, a world that constantly changes. The reason we probably can't do that now, and the reason you have like 2 years in between WoW expansions, because that takes a lot of damn work, a lot of time. You hand design a lot of that, right? That you could do it if you had the budget to do it, but that doesn't exist in reality. So the way to do that is let players change the world through some sort of action, which is going to be PvP.
I don't know. I think you could still do something similar to Ashes of Creation, but have what's attacking and destroying the towns be PvE based, and have those things changed still based on what players are building in the town.
And eventually, I think AI and procedural generation, all that, you probably will get to that point. But what's the fun of that, right? Though, I mean, you don't have the human unknown component.
You do have the human unknown because it's going to be dependent on what you're building.
No, I'm talking about the side of the AI, right? So through all of this is also the subtleties of like a kingdom or whatever, a metropolis trying to attack another one, and maybe someone's a spy, and like things that you just can't really get through a pre-programmed AI at this point. That's what's going to drive the stories and make it fun.
Yeah, that's not what's going to make it fun for me, but
you're going to have to experience it, though. That's the thing. At some point, you're going to have to experience it. Well, no, it's not for me either. I want to sit on a damn farm and breed horses and grow corn. At some point, though, I'm going to have that interaction in order for the world to change and have some sort of story change.
Right, but again, that's not necessarily the fun part. I think another aspect of it is even with the monster coin attacks. So in the monster coin events, players can be the monsters. And I always have said that, once AI can start thinking as ruthless as players, I'm probably not going to be playing MMORPGs because I like the fact that I know how to kill the mobs and I can kill mobs better than I can kill players. I think one of the other factors when I think about PvP and Ashes of Creation, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work in Chronicles of Illyria, but when I think about PvP and how I hope it ends up in Ashes of Creation, especially since we have some Daybreak devs on the design team, is the Storybricks example of the the Dark Elves siphon life energy from Dryads in order to transmute that into dark energy, shadow energies, and the shadow energy powers stealth. And because I'm a rogue and that's part of my exploration, that helps me explore more my ability to stealth. I can imagine that I would be helping Dark Elves siphon that life energy and turn it into shadow energy for shadow magic. And if some player druids in the Kithakor Forest was the example, try to stop me from siphoning the life energy from Dryads, and I have to fight them, I'm just going to have to fight them. Not because I want to fight them, but because I'm more focused on getting the life energy. And I would expect that I would like that form of PvP, because it's not something that I'm forced into. And, you know, if I can talk them out of fighting, then maybe we don't have to fight. We might be able to come up with some way that we don't have to fight. But I won't be fighting them because I love PvP. I'll be fighting them because I love shadow magic and stealth. And I'm going to do what I got to do to be at the top of my game for that, those abilities. So that's what I'm, the type of, and the concept there was meaningful conflict. Not just, oh, I hate your kind, you know, you're an elf and I'm a dark elf or whatever, so I hate you, I'm going to kill you, which I think is a pantheon thing. That group tends to think that's the fun, is the racial, the race wars. That's what makes risk and reward fun. Yeah, I hope we have meaningful conflict where it's like, you know, yeah, I'm sorry. And that's one of the things that I like about the way they are doing destruction in Ashes of Creation is one of the reasons why I might go into PvP against a node is because it turns out that when it popped to the next level, instead of it continuing my Vec architecture, it's now elf architecture, and I don't want elf architecture. I want Vec architecture in my home that I spent months working towards. So now I've got to do what I can to knock it down or destroy it and try and get that Vec city or metropolis back up. So it won't be again about, oh, I just, you know, hate these players or that I'm fighting players. It's just I got to do what I got to do to get what I want.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we're actually moving along. Mm-hmm. We've not really touched on anything. So APOC, did you? I forget. Did you?
Wait. Let's do a horse. Let's make sure we get our title in.
Oh, a horse is a horse. Well,
yeah.
we can do the questions. I mean, that's where that came from.
Well, we didn't even start about the horses that they showed in live streams. That's one.
Because a horse is a horse, and we talked about horses.
And we had some new horses shown in the live stream. So last time they showed us just the basic horse, the noble horse, I think it was called. And this time they showed us that they're working on some of the skins that were part of the Kickstarter package and the summer package. The Obsidian horse, and I forget what the daytime version of that, what the name of it is. But they showed off 3 different horses. You can see their runes glowing in the dark. And see some of their barding. So they're working towards modeling the concept art that they were showing us early on 2 years ago, Kickstarter, and in the very first packages that were offered, monthly packages. So they're working through that content. But, you know, it is still basically the same horses we saw last week, just with, you know, tattoos.
Are they all smiling?
Not this time.
They don't have their mouths open. I can't remember.
Because that was weird.
No, it was a little weird.
They had was it reptile teeth? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Horse is a horse.
But that was leading us also into alpha, beta?
Yeah, so part of there actually were several interesting questions from the live stream. Before we get to that, I'm curious if you think this is interesting. Every time I read these transcripts, they start off, and I don't know how many minutes they spend, because again, I can't tell in a transcript, talking about they bring on somebody that's doing the back end, and they're like, oh, well, we're doing, how interesting is that really to every live stream? I don't know. To me, that's not very interesting, but
what's key, and I do like it, is that we get to meet and see individuals, new people on the streams. I like
that part. But when they sort of come on and they say, "Oh, well, I'm doing art," I'm like, well, yeah, that's that's what you're supposed to be doing. Or I'm doing the back end logging in stuff, and that's kind of all they say. It's like, oh, okay, it's nice to meet you. Anyways, so there was a question that kind of made me super confused, and I need to actually find it. And the answer was actually not at all related to the question. It was kind of related to the question, which I think actually speaks to Steven's thought process on why he said it. So the question was, do you plan to add any improvements to fighting enemies? Which, number one, I think is kind of a dumb question, because this is all testing, so of course they're going to. But his answer was, yep, there's lots of feedback, and we want to work on many things. People were asking why beta was applied to Apocalypse. We consider beta as something accessible to all, while alpha is a restrictive test, so we used beta term for Apocalypse, even though the project is in a pre-alpha state. I just am like, that's like a verbal diarrhea. I don't know what that, it's a pre-alpha state, but we're calling it a beta, even though it's still an alpha, but it's not an alpha.
It's an early access game. It's not a beta. In fact, unless they're willing to say that Apocalypse is for sure going to be its own game, and this is what it is going to be, it's hard to even say this is an alpha or a beta or anything. This still feels like just a prototype and still just part of the building blocks of the later components. So I feel like even using alpha beta terminology at this point is still premature, and that we're playing an early access prototype.
But I don't understand why people would be confused 5 years after Landmark, because we had this discussion.
Because very few people played Landmark. That's why it doesn't exist anymore.
But you did.
No, I didn't.
You didn't play Landmark?
I mean, for a little bit. I wasn't playing it like y'all were. Part of the reason probably why I quit playing is I stopped.
Well, you played it enough to know what it was.
I say that somewhat jokingly. I did not put in the time you did.
When Landmark went into beta, that was the major conversation. Why are they calling this beta when it's clearly still alpha, if alpha? But this is not feature complete, clearly. So why are you calling it a beta? And the reason they called it a beta is because they sold packages, and they were opening the next phase of early access, because they said they would by a certain month, to the people who bought beta access packs. And since then, we have seen that this is the trend. Beta no longer refers to the state of the game in terms of being feature complete and just working on bug fixes. It now refers to what level, how many people you're letting into the game. And I had this argument back in February with Jaylon. He was saying the same thing as you, Phantom, like, no, words have meaning. I don't know why they're calling it this. It must be a this. Like, no, it's just referring to level of access.
Or it satisfies the need to basically complete the purchase, right? You bought beta access. We're going to call this beta. Now we don't owe you anything else because you had your beta access.
I mean, that's definitely part of it. Yeah. We completed our terms because we let you in.
To me, and again, for people who don't know, my job in life is to sort of try to understand people and help them, but how they think. So the fact that he answered, like, because that wasn't actually the question, tells me one, that he's had to defend this position a lot because people are like, this doesn't make any sense. And two, that he just knows it doesn't really make any sense. So that makes me wonder more about the financial, like, we're satisfying your packages kind of thing. Because the question was just, are you going to improve gameplay? And he goes into this whole, well, this was a beta, and this is why we called it beta. Like, nobody asked about that.
Well, I don't know.
So so the fact that his mind immediately went to having to explain that when that was not part of the question.
It could have been part of the question.
But it wasn't. No, it was. I'm looking at the transcript.
Right, but it's not a full
fake news.
Transcript. It's not a full transcript, so we'd have to listen to the soundbite actually to make sure.
I don't know. I do know
that it's not a full transcript.
And I don't know why I'm so picky about that. I don't think it's just Ashes. I feel like I get picky. I mean, we've had this discussion before, like I said, the Landmark. But I feel like there's a lot of tendency for just, I don't know. Steven he seems to say things just to sort of satisfy people. And I don't know. I start questioning, like, is this the best choice for your PR person to be interacting with everyone? Because, we've talked about how most of the time his answers are basically yes. And I get it. It's his baby, his game. I often wonder, though, is that the right person to be making public discussions? But also honestly, I get it. He's funding a big part of this, but, like, is that really, if you're truly trying to create a game and he's not really has that background, he has a background as a player, like, is that really the best thing to have someone so, in the everything aspect? I don't know.
So,
making any sense, but.
On the one hand, what's interesting about Stephen and the way he answers, in my view, is that, and where I kind of am in agreement with you, I think, is that he answers what he wants to answer, and that might not necessarily be the question that was asked. Again, in this case, we don't know exactly what was left out of the question or what was left out of the answer, because although the transcript comes out very quickly, it's kind of done in real time. So
we'll have to review it. And
it's not time.
Yeah, but I mean, just in overall, I mean, in this day and age, people take receipts. They're going to have all this written down. They're going to have screenshots of this. So it's like, you have to be kind of careful, right? What you say. And it's fluctuated. It's fluctuated some with them. I mean, initially it was sort of, the joke was that it was just yes. Then it sort of shifted towards yes, but we're going to do it later in expansion. So it's still yes, but it's like softening the blow that when we first open the doors, you're not going to actually have this yet. I don't know. There was actually, where was the answer? There was another question, and the way it was answered, I think, speaks perfectly probably to how he is. You keep
Well, I was going to say also that I do think that, we can see the growing pains. Like when he was saying, look, we're at PAX already, and, we're one of the only people who've ever come to PAX this early. Well, that was 2 years ago. They weren't at PAX this year. I think they didn't go to, PAX East last time. So I think they missed PAX East and they did not go to PAX West. They were going to release the game before 2020. And it's like, are you really? Those of us who have worked on production have a different point of view.
We're going to release the game before 2020 is over.
So there's some growing pains. He's having to learn. I think there are some issues there. You can't always do what you want. But another thing that's kind of happening, it happened on stream this time. Someone asked about the other 4 classes, more information about those. And it was like, oh yeah, we're going to give those to you on a blog sometime down the road. I think it's been a year and a half since we got information on the first 4 classes. it would be nice to start having some information on the other 4. But Steven is blocking that. So it's like there is information, but they can't talk about it. And kind of the same with Castle Sieges. A couple of people that they brought on were kind of like, oh, like I'm working on this and I'd really like to talk about this, but I guess I'm not allowed to yet, huh, Steven? No, you can't talk about that yet. And the same thing with Nodes 3. Like Nodes 3 was supposed to come out probably a year and a half ago, but Steven's holding that up for some reason because it's got to be perfect. And I think maybe it probably doesn't have to be so perfect. We could be getting some more steady information. I think even there's another Know Your Node. So we had scientific, what did we have? Scientific, did we have economic, divine? Or are we waiting? I think we
only had 2, right?
Only 2? Okay. So,
right? Yeah, the first 2 you mentioned. I don't think we've had.
Okay, so we had divine and scientific, and I think economic is supposed to be next, but that was 3 months ago. And I think the article's pretty much written. It's just Steven hasn't given the okay yet for us to read the article. And so there's some obstacles like that just seem to be problematic. And maybe if we had a more experienced person, it would be a little bit smoother how info is being dropped.
But here I found the quote, and this I think is probably the perfect. This is probably, they probably said this jokingly, but this probably describes him very well. It said there was a question about finding hidden locations, viewpoints, and they basically said yes. And at the very end, I don't know who said this. I hope it wasn't Steven, because if it was, he was talking in third person. It says Steven is an exploration player too. He just prefers to conquer what he explores. That's probably the perfect description of what his mindset is. And I say that because, again, going back to this PvE, PvP question and like what is going to be sort of the dominant thought process here, that right there tells you, right? Well, yeah, exploration, PvE, but he likes to conquer what he explores. So heavy PvP. I wish I have to go back and watch and see who said that. So we are, gosh, it's 8:55. There was another question at the very end that I thought was super interesting. Will the MMO hybrid combat be skill-based or gear-based in terms of who will win a fight? And the answer that he gave was basically said, gear will matter, but we want skill to matter too. Which he then kind of went on and said, essentially, skill will be important within 5 to 10 levels. So if I was level 60 and you're level 50, basically, your skill should be able to have you basically win in a fight with me, which I thought was sort of interesting. I guess it's a great thing. I mean, I hate the whole idea of a power, huge power scales. It was just interesting to me because, in what other game, are you going to see that happen, right? And World of Warcraft, 110 is going to beat 120? No. That just doesn't really exist. And I'm curious to see how many people complain about that as that becomes a reality.
I think the disturbing part for me was I thought the level cap was 50, but he says level 60. And so I would prefer the level cap to be as kind of low as possible. So closer to D&D.
Let's do a Guild Wars, level 20.
I'm saying I'd like it to be closer to 20, 25. Because then you get too much power creep once you start getting up into 50. And, then 90 and then 100. That's just too much.
There's another way this can be approached. And it's kind of dependent on something. If the attributes of the enemies are abstracted from the same attributes that players have, then this might not necessarily work the same way, but the thought that I was having is a lot of games have a discrepancy. They understand you're doing thousands and thousands of damage against these enemies who are hitting you for like 150, 250 on a crit, big chunky, things on your 2,000 hit point health meter. But if you were actually to attack another player with the amount of damage that you do to enemies, it would be like a one-shot arena. You would just be exploding each other. So instead, they water it down, where the PvE equipment and the PvP equipment have different attributes. And to that extent, they could keep the level system intact for PvE purposes, but for PvP purposes, they could level things out a lot more, so it feels a little more even. Likewise, or opposite to that, I should say, if the enemy stats are in fact derived from player stats and they are, in a similar attribute range, closer to like a D&D character instead of like a JRPG character, then it just really lends itself to how much of a power creep there is, that between 1 and 60, it's going to be a combination of, sure, all of your gear across that, but then even still, with the differentiation between 10 levels of skill, that a 50 versus a 60 is kind of a beatable fight. That kind of sucks. Like, what about if I've got a pack of level 30s that are going to hunt one level 60? Are we all going to get our asses kicked? Or is it actually going to be somewhat of a reasonable fight? That's something that always pisses me off, the idea that you can't bring a small force of low level people to take down one single person of a higher level. And I exploited that in WoW, back in vanilla WoW, to take over that first elf town in the neutral area. I just start killing all the NPCs, killing the guards, killing all the players that come through. It would usually take them, because I was spec for PvP, 2 to 3 level 60s to finally root me out of there. Mm-hmm. And it was fun to do that sort of a raid, but it also seemed ridiculous to me that I'm this level 60 player that's PvP spec, and I can just walk into a town and take it over and destroy everything. That's absurd. Like, what the hell is the point of the guards then, if they aren't even going to be powerful enough or organized enough to do anything about me?
Right. I keep wishing that would be, so it seems like things are scaled or have been scaled in EQ and WoW, so that we're fighting the big boss. And because it's a raid against a big boss, that big boss has to be able to deal out, thousands of points of damage at a time. I would prefer if it was always more like horde versus raid, if we're talking about a horde of monsters, or raid of NPCs versus a raid of players, so that we can have more opponents that we're fighting rather than one big one that everybody's fighting. Mm-hmm. And keep those power levels down that way. When we're getting up to level 60, I think that's not going to be the case. It seems like it's going to be a more traditional MMORPG level scaling. And that we will eventually, within 5 or 6 years, be at level 90.
Players need goals.
Goals is goals.
Can't be a true sandbox.
It's not a true sandbox.
It's a
theme park. It's a theme box. It's a sand park.
Otherwise, people will lose interest.
Yep.
Well, we are close, actually, at the end. We did not cover a lot of stuff, so.
No.
We covered our title. That's good.
We did.
Well, yeah, we usually don't get to that. So the only thing I wanted to add is I feel like I complain more about this game than anything else. Something needs to change. So the new...
you need to play APOC.
I will play with the game files. I don't think I have any interest in playing with the game. The Order of the Luminous Levin. So this again comes... This is cool and all, and I'm okay with it. I just personally don't care if you buy items that necessarily give you a power in the game. Whatever. If you want to spend your money, go ahead and do it. The thing I get a little kind of confused or frustrated about is I don't necessarily hear Steven saying all the time anymore, this is not a pay-to-win game, right? He would say that all the time in the beginning. So the understanding was you bought these items, and they were basically cosmetic. They were not really going to give you anything that would give you leverage or advancement in the game, which I did find some purchasable experience potions. But, it just drives me nuts. I wish they would make it more clear. Like the coil of crackling skies, like is that a cosmetic sort of something happens within the environment around you that doesn't, you think of a ring, like some can have some sort of power associated with it. Some of them are a little bit clearer, right? Like there's essentially a pet and a mount. Cool. There was one that like the Thunderhead longboat, and it says, essentially they grant favor to sailors on the ship, the assurance of safe passage through inclement weather. To me, that implies that this boat, even if it's a skin that you're purchasing, somehow influences the gameplay. Like it's going to make you safer in an unsafe environment. And that is something that I guess, when it comes to pay to win, I get confused. So I can only imagine, we've been following this from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So someone who just joined.
Yeah, exactly. Is
like
it flower language to sell it or whatever? Or is it
right.
actually something functional? And to A, not specify it, but B, to use such wording as if this is some truly magnificent item, and then to finally come into the game, it's like, nope, you just left a skin on your boat. You didn't even own the boat until you finally built one or bought one. Like that's unsatisfying and feels kind of deceptive.
And that's exactly my point. Let's say I just happened to somebody retweeted Ashes of Creation video gameplay, and I thought, oh, that looks cool. So I go to the website and I start looking at this. If I'm not very aware, if I'm not searching through a lot of different things, I read that and I think that I'm purchasing something that's going to give me some sort of advantage within essentially stormy weather. It's going to make me safer and my boat be at less of a risk if I have this specific skin. Or again, you don't even necessarily know that it's a skin. It looks like it's just a boat. I just wish they would word that better. But I've said that all along. I basically say that with every package because it's always the same. There's always one or two items where it just very clearly looks like it gives you some sort of advantage, and we're not supposed to have that. And I don't care if we have that. If they have sort of shifted and they say, well, we're not going to give you, power gains, or we're not going to give you experience potions, but there maybe will be some items that will give you some sort of maybe environmental benefit. That's fine. I don't care. But, you should probably mention that one way or the other. So, all right. Anything else before we sign off for the week?
We might not be back for a month. We might be focused on CLE.
Oh, yeah,
September.
for Ashen Forge, we might be off for a little bit here because the gears are moving in the other show we're covering here. So we'll be taking a little break. We're gonna have some guests on. We're gonna be doing some cool stuff. Sounds like we're gearing up for. Are we confirmed on the Wednesday?
Yes,
we are confirmed for everything.
All right. So it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, let me try to actually find real quick before we go who and the dates. Yeah. So we'll have 4 shows over the next 2 weeks. Actually, I'll put this in here just for anyone that might watch or is watching now. We also have a giveaway for EP. Yeah, so on the 4th, so September 4th, I cannot pronounce it. How do you, is it Selene?
Oh, that's close enough, yeah.
Yeah. Duchess and Blackheart will be with us on Friday the 6th. Polite, which we've had before on the show, who's Duke and Ashlyn, will be with us on the following Wednesday on the 11th. John Warren, who's a Duke and Elysia, will be with us. And then on that Friday, we'll actually have the King of Riftwood. So, and who knows, maybe we'll put together some other stuff in between then. But
we have 2 weeks to do that, so I'm expecting some other shows after that. Yeah.
I mean, we have four this all the way around. Mayors don't pick till when? The 16th of September?
Right, I'm just saying we have 2 weeks to start getting even more people so that by the time we get to,
and it has started because I noticed looking through the maps today that the first... so within Ashland, it was, what did I say it was? I noticed the
Green
first
something?
Green Heights. Yes, Green Heights was selected, so that seems to be one of the first, which I think was expected. But we can talk about that next time. So.
Yeah, that's for the other show. So, Ashen Forge will be back a little ways down the road. There's obviously always a chance that one of us might pop on either here or our own channel to play it a little bit, the Apocalypse beta. So, be on the lookout for that. And other than that, we're hoping to see more coming from Apocalypse, and perhaps that they rescind the beta designation or something, or explain better why they've decided to own it. But that is what it is. Should be interesting to see what's going on with that in the next little bit, and we'll have plenty to talk about in the next episode.
Yep. So everyone have a good weekend and a good half week. We'll be back on Wednesday.
Yeah.
See you.
See you later, folks.